Welcome, everyone. I'm so grateful that you are with us this morning. My name is Kevin Bates, and I'm with Resonate Christian Church. If you want to find out more about who we are as a community, you can go to resonatechristian.church, or you can download our app through the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, and you can connect in with us there. You can look at our archives of talks, podcasts, and live broadcasts, and also our next conversations. You can also find out our calendar and what we're doing and where we're going. Our next gathering is April 5th. So today is March 22nd, and April 5th is our next gathering. That's our great spring gathering. Each year for Easter, that's what we do is we open house. We have a large brunch and also just an art display, just displaying different thoughts and ideas about the spring season. That's April 5th, starting at 10 o'clock, live here in Sherwood, live gathering at the Rebecca Lodge. You can look at our archive material and get caught up on some of our podcasts, or you can give through that website. So today we're doing something a little bit different. What I want to do is talk through some ideas with you, and then I'm going to add, for those that want to participate or listen, I'm going to add what I call a theological layer. I want to start just adding a few ideas about Christianity in the greater cultural ideas that we have, just to make sure that we are grounded in some spiritual topics, but also we can find ourselves in those spaces without resenting those spaces. And so I want to give us a new look at Christianity and spirituality here moving forward, especially when we are dealing with a culture today that there is a lot of toxic and also very difficult adverse behavior that's happening within our Christian movement called Christian nationalism. I think Christian nationalism is a cult. I don't support it, and I think that it is probably one of the greatest downfalls of what we're experiencing in our culture today. So with all that is happening in our society, in our cities, in our states, in our world, in our country today, I think it's important to realize the importance of us staying grounded, the individual staying stable, and being able to walk through very challenging situations with a heartfelt resilience. There's a moment that all of us know. And that moment when something small happens in our lives, or big, our reactions get bigger and bigger and bigger in that moment. Or the opposite happens. Something meaningful is happening around us, something that is important, something that is love and joy, and we feel nothing. We feel disconnected, maybe numb, not fully there or not fully present. And somewhere in that space, the question usually arises within myself. I ask the question, what is wrong with me? I think what is wrong, I'm broken. Maybe I'm thinking I'm just dysregulated, that it's my problem. Let me be clear from the beginning here. There's nothing wrong with you in those spaces. We know that we get dysregulated, either too high or too low when stimulus happens in our life. And you can really honestly, in those moments, in our brains and in our bodies, you are experiencing exactly what it means to be fully human. You are a full human being, and we are designed and created to experience the whole range of emotions and reactions. Even our brain is designed for fight and flight. So we know that being fully human comes with all that is human. In spiritual talk, or in this theological layer, I want to make sure that we understand that oftentimes in church circles, we talk about sin and brokenness, and that's the focus. That creates a lot of shame, that creates a lot of guilt that it's very hard to navigate through. But sometimes we forget that we were created fully embodied. We are a full human being. We weren't created broken. We were created with goodness, and that good in Hebrew can be translated as beautiful. So we were created wholly beautiful on this earth to just experience full embodiment. And so you're not just a soul with a body, you're a living being. You have a body, you have a mind, you have a spirit, and all of that is integrated. So when your body reacts, you're not experiencing failure. This is a part of who you are. This is a part of being fully human. So I want to give a metaphor this morning, and I love rivers. I love the outdoors. I love to take hikes. I have fished a lot in my life. I have floated rivers a lot. I've kayaked. I've inner tubed down rivers. I've rafted down rivers. I've spent a lot of time in rivers in my life. Although I don't necessarily do a sport that's designed for rivers, I do love to sit on the side of a river. And I want to give you that picture today. If you could imagine your favorite river, maybe it's something here locally around us. Maybe it's something that somewhere you grew up. I spent a lot of time next to lakes and rivers growing up. I then moved to a state that had lots of lakes and rivers. So spending lots of time next to the water was a part of just who I was and my daily activity. Our lives are like a river. Sometimes the water is very steady. Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes it's like glass. Many times it's we can navigate it very well. We can get in our kayak, we can start to paddle, and we can steer, and the flow keeps us moving forward. Sometimes it speeds up. Sometimes there's rapids. Sometimes there's crashing. Sometimes it's completely overwhelming. Yet sometimes you are so slow, you're still, you're in a kayak, you're heavy, you're stuck, you're dragging butt on the rocks. And your goal is to not necessarily stop in the river. Your goal is to learn how to stay in the boat and navigate the river. So imagine that the river in and of itself is just like life. But when the river gets overflowed and it comes up over the banks, or the rapids get too high and they're like a class 5, it's very hard to navigate. The river starts to navigate you versus you navigating the river. Or like I said, when it's too dry, you're getting out of the river and you're walking your boat to the next stream that is a little more full. So this is a consistent metaphor that I see in lots of spiritual ancient material and writing. In some of the Vedics, in Christianity, in Islamic literature, you'll see, and in Buddhist literature as well, you will see that the metaphor of life, wholeness, salvation, that metaphor is dynamic, it's not static, and it's usually the metaphor of life and salvation. I've seen several music videos over the last handful of years, and those music videos very, very intelligently puts water at the center of transition and change. I can put in the notes maybe some of these music videos because I don't have license to do it online, but maybe I can put a link underneath in the show notes of this podcast that you can listen to some of those. Water usually in ancient literature, also poetic materials, in novels, right at the center of transition, where they're moving from one status to the next status, moving from death to life, moving from chaos to normalcy. Water is usually used right at the center of that, showing that water, or this metaphor of water, means rootedness in motion. So the river metaphor as life, we need to be rooted in motion as we kayak down this river. Now, that's very hard to do, especially when you feel, think, and perceive that we are surrounded by daily chaos. When things like social media had entered into our lives some time ago, that is a continual feed of sometimes chaos, sometimes happiness. Oh, look at what they're doing, or look at whose child was born the other day. that continual influx of material sometimes can be good. They're proving that most of the time, chaos coming across line is very damaging to not only our minds, but also physically our bodies. If you read the book, The Anxious Generation, The Anxious Generation is a data study about how social media is affecting our children and how suicide rates are up. Child, especially female cutting, is up. The imagery, the image comparisons, all that's going on just socially online, just human social relational online is damaging enough. Now add all of the political chaos, the social chaos that's happening maybe at more of a political or policy level. It is very difficult to stay rooted and resilient in times like this. And so I want to give us some tools today that I believe are important, that as we navigate, whether we make the choice to engage in an action plan like a protest, or we engage in letter writing, or we engage in phone calls and bringing awareness, or we're doing something like feeding houseless like we're doing today, or we're just active in our communities and trying to bring awareness to what is right and real and true. I think it's really important that we are not about we're not eliminating movement. We're not eliminating the waves. We're not eliminating the choppy water. That's going to happen. What we're doing is we're attempting to remain rooted and resilient as everything moves. So I've used that word a couple of times so far, resilient. And there is something in our life that we experience called the resilient zone. And the resilient zone, just clinically, we might call it the resilient zone or the okay zone. So like when a nurse walks in and she or he asks you on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain scale? And you say, my pain scale is 12, right? Whatever you're experiencing in that moment, you identify as just off the charts. That's outside of your resilient zone. If you are just numb and you're not feeling anything and you say -5 because you're not feeling anything, that's also a problem. And so that's a clinically proven scale that as long as the data is recorded, they know that you are basically trying to find your pain resilient zone while you lay in a hospital bed while you're healing. So it's not a happy zone, because when I'm in pain, I'm not necessarily happy, but it's a place where you still feel okay, that you can navigate the chaos, the waves, and the choppy water. You can navigate the pain. You can navigate the frustration, the sadness, the anxiety even, and the stress, and still remain within this zone. So as you are frustrated, you're not losing your crap in a meeting or something like that. As you're sad, you're not like hiding, disappearing, and crawling into your cave. When you're stressed, you're actually able to still respond with clarity. That's your resilient zone. And I think that the idea of steadfastness, that word steadfastness, is really important. It's something that we've talked in spiritual circles for a long time about. Steadfastness is maturity. Steadfastness is wholeness or finding wholeness within ourselves. I think that steadfastness is not emotional suppression. It's not denial. It's just integrated presence. It's integrated with what you're dealing with. If you're in the midst of what seems to be a chaotic situation, you're able to enter into that fully present with clarity and not losing yourself in the moment. So when I think about my resilient zone, what I think about is me not talking so much, me not talking over everyone in the room. That means that I have too much anxiety or I'm scared about what is happening in the room. So I'm just over talking. I'm not under talking. And what I'm saying is clear and makes sense. I'm not saying it with, just a perceived anger or rage as I'm entering into a conversation. So when you're dealing, what is your resilient zone? So start to put together a set of words. Describe who you are in your resilient zone. Describe maybe who you are when you're outside of your resilient zone, either too high or too low. So we do have that outside space, and sometimes we can get stuck in those outside spaces, which can be dangerous. There is a tendency to move in one over the other direction. So your expression of anxiety, your expression of stress might be to go outside too high, or your expression of stress might be to go too low. So the low zone, everything slows down. So usually that's connected to depression, that's connected to just withdrawal or disconnection or numbness. High zones usually are connected to anxiety, reactivity, and like urgency. Like this has to be taken care of now, when in all intents and purposes, it can't be taken care of right now, but it has to be according to your high zone. So that's not failure. I don't think if you're in high zones or low zones, you're wrong. We can do wrong things within those, but if we are in those zones and we're not practicing our resilient zones, that's not failure. I believe that that's our human experience. I do believe that the Bible, if I look at the Bible, it gives us permission to experience both of those extremes. Why so downcast my soul? David famously said in the Psalm, and he names it. He actually names the downcast. He actually talks to his soul, not just from it. Or the high zone, my heart is anguished. I am an anguished individual. I have terror, I have fear, I have trembling inside. I am overwhelmed. That's not a mild emotion. That's the body in full activation. So my heart is racing, I have fear surging, I have a sense of being overtaken. So that is the high zone. What's interesting is this author of that psalm names it. So that's like the theological layer that I was talking about, to stay rooted in what is true about what spirituality is teaching us, and not just to reject spirituality because of what spirituality has done over the last couple of years. But there's also a biology to this whole thing. So let's talk about how we were designed. In our nervous system, we have a nervous system. Somebody just right before our broadcast here handed me something about the vagus nerve stimulation. Our nervous system speaks to us. It regulates us. It moves us. It is thinking within us. There's a lot of power in our nervous system, and it's always asking the question. Our nervous system actually is always asking the question, am I safe? So when the answer is no, I am not safe, our body shifts. When the answer is no, we might go in the high zone, we might go in the low zone. We might fight, flight. We're in that activation, or the low zone. We might shut down, we might withdraw, we might freeze. And this is not weakness. This is by design. Like, this is the way that my body is designed and acts. And so for the technical people out there, this is our sympathetic nervous system, which causes us to go outside of our resilient zone. And our parasympathetic system is the system that causes us to come back into our resilient zone. So the biology of the action is actually keeping us within this zone. So when I have a continual feed of cultural chaos in my life, it is very possible that my sympathetic is overpowering my parasympathetic nervous system. So that's the technical ideas. We have our prefrontal cortex, our amygdala. The brain is a powerful organ in our body, and it does speak, it moves, It acts, it settles, it activates who we are. Do we have power over that? I think we do. I think that it is proven. There's studies that have been proven that our body, and let's say you use the words body, mind, and spirit. Body, mind, and spirit work together to navigate through the waves, the chaos, and the flooding, or the rocks, whichever one we are experiencing. And so learning to regulate our body is a discipline. And it's a discipline that people like Johns Hopkins University and some other large hospital groups have proven that in dysregulation, we can use different methods and different techniques to move back into regulation. I think about the theological layer that a lot of times is used, the old story of Jesus in the boat with the disciples in the storm, that Jesus is sleeping and the disciples are freaking out. Jesus is the one that's in resilient zone. The disciples are freaking out and they're outside of the resilient zone. So one is in panic and one is in resilience. The comparison there is striking because one describes a sense of security, non-anxious presence, and the other one describes anxiety and chaos. So could we be like the non-anxious presence? Because in the midst of the chaos, a non-anxious presence can get things done. Somebody that is within their resilience can accomplish a lot. Now, maybe there's a time that we need to be stern. Maybe there's a time that we go really quite high up into our resilient zone. Frustration is not outside of the resilient zone. Even some anger can be seen as not outside of the resilient zone. I think flipping out, screaming and yelling and throwing a tantrum, that could be outside of our resilient zone. That's in the storm. That's the people in the boat that are just flipping out. So could we practice something like peace be still? Could we practice something like the non-anxious, secure presence? Again, we deal on a daily basis. This is our norm now of dealing on a daily basis with chaos. It is being shown right now that watching someone getting killed on social media over and over and over again is changing our neural pathways as human beings. When I was younger, we never saw that. When I was younger in my developmental years, especially like 12, 13, 14, 15, I was never exposed to those kinds of real life images. Yeah, maybe on the movies, we all knew that was fake. When the video game era that I just really never participated in, there was a scare during that era that kids engaging in that kind of game that showed that much violence was dangerous. Although now they've proven that knowing that that's fake does change that dynamic. Think about how much greater the impact is knowing something that you're watching is real. People dying in front of us, violence in front of us over and over and over again changes our neural pathways in our brain. So we need to learn techniques. Now is the time to learn techniques that are proven, that are clinical, that are definitely going to help us in our future. And they're simple. It's a way to return back to a non-anxious presence. We're going to go outside of our non-anxious presence. I mean, that's just reality. We're going to go outside of our resilient zone. Sometimes we're going to want to hide. Sometimes we're going to want to flip out. It's just the human experience. Yet we need to come back. And these concepts, there's 3 of them that I want to give you today. These concepts have been used in different clinical settings, in counseling therapy, neurobiology, any big T or little t traumas that people are experiencing. They've used these 3 ideas and concepts in those clinical settings with clinical psychologists. Addiction recovery, tragedy, chronic illnesses. Those are just a few examples of, in research and also study, but also in practice, just in an office or take home material that you're practicing at home. They're proven to regulate our nervous system back to grounding. They might sound simple, but they're actually very profound, and they do make a difference. So the first one is called tracking, or let's just call it noticing. Some people don't notice what's happening in their body. And this idea of tracking is the first concept that I want to give, but it's also the one that's going to kind of weave through the other two, because you're always going to notice, you're always going to track what's happening inside of your body. It is known that some people carry stress physically in different parts of their body. Unfortunately, that could happen in an organ, and heart rates just are elevated long term to the point of illness, even death. And so we know that stress and anxiety can pack itself in different physical manifestations. So my shoulder hurts, a chronic pain in my shoulder or my upper back here, that could be a sign of just a physical manifestation of stress. Noticing that, tracking that, feeling that, noticing the sensations in my body. So when I enter into a chaotic situation, when I enter into an argument, a fight, a conflict, when I'm entering into a high stress environment, it's really important to notice what's happening in my body, that awareness of presence. Most of us do not track. We walk through life and we just power through. Sometimes we have to, because things need to get done. Children need to get raised, fed, off to school. I get it. But yet, there needs to be a time when we raise our awareness of what's happening inside of us. A lot of times we are under a chronic stress, and it's very hard at certain moments to track or notice what's happening in our body. It could be heart pain. It could be some kind of breathing problem, or it could be gut problems that we have. Wherever our stress is, the sensations are happening. Noticing those sensations are really important, because awareness is the beginning of transformation. So when we are aware of what's happening, we can then start addressing what is happening and some of the core issues. So what is happening in me right now is a very important question. Maybe you take time every day in a journal, on a piece of paper, on a napkin, written on your arm, whatever you need to do, to just track, I feel this. I'm now feeling this. Whatever it is, just track it, notice it. It could be an increased heart rate. I was noticing my heart rate. There's certain times in the day that I notice, wow, my heart rate is over 100 in a consistent basis during this moment, and this moment, like for an hour. So I am approaching cardio in my body without doing cardio. I'm approaching cardio. My heart rate is increased because I'm dealing with this kind of stress. That's how stress affects us so greatly physically. It could be an ache. It could be a gyrating, like you feel when I drink too much cold brew, I feel that tingling inside. Too much coffee, you get kind of the shakes on the inside. Many people under their stress that don't drink coffee feel the shakes on the inside. So what is going on in our body? Too hot? What is the physical manifestations of the discomfort? So when somebody is angry at you, when you're feeling overwhelmed in a conversation or in a situation, no one has to be talking. You could just be listening to something and you are overwhelmed with a sensation that's a physical manifestation. Now, when somebody's yelling at you, screaming at you, abusive towards you, one of the physical sensations that you're experiencing might be pain. And that pain, let me just give you the emotional side of this, because this is clinical. That pain is the physical manifestation of shame. So when somebody is screaming at you, that is a shame-based type technique to shame you away. Or name calling, when someone's just name calling, and we hear that a lot right now. Somebody's dumb and stupid, and it's just the constant name calling that people now are very used to from high levels in our government of name calling. I can't believe that that's happening right now. And when you are name called over and over and over again, spousal abuse is a prime example of this. There is physical manifestations of shame. We need to learn to track it. We need to learn to recognize it. We need to learn what to do about it. So next tool, then what do we start to do about it? It's called resourcing. In clinical trials, what they've done is they've put people in a room or in a situation to give them a resource. A lot of times that's what recovery groups are all about. When we're all together with the same challenge, that's very comforting because you're kind of partnered arm in arm with people that are sharing the same challenges that you're experiencing in life. That's why recovery groups or recovery circles sometimes are really important. People find a lot of solace or resource in that situation. Your resource might be something like a person or a memory of a person. It could be taking a walk. It could be going. I know some people that they're under so much stress, I need to go for a run. So they go for a run. What is the resource in your life? It could be a memory or it could be an activity. What is the resource that when you remember it, you begin to steady back to re-regulation? You've learned to track. You're noticing I'm under stress. What is the resource? Now, sometimes you're in the office, you're working, you're doing, you're lifing, you're raising, you're doing stuff. And so to go for a run or I'm going to take a walk, it's just not an option. That's where memory is a powerful tool. I have great memories that I've practiced this leading up to this talk. I've actually practiced some of these things. And with my kids, I'm starting to practice with them as well. When they are negative biased, maybe towards school, or they're negative biased towards each other, right? They're just at each other's throat for the day or whatever. We begin to resource. And a lot of resourcing does have to do with gratitude, where we're finding the things that we are grateful for. Now, how come gratitude is such a powerful tool? Well, gratitude actually, in an EEG, lights up our Usula brain. When we practice gratitude, it actually lights up certain parts of our prefrontal cortex, which is a powerful notion because that means that we are able to rewire our brain. Now, let me be careful about what I'm saying there. In a software issue, not a hardware issue. So if we have hardware issues in our brain, that's something different. Like a traditional epilepsy is a hardware issue. But a software issue like anxiety or depression, that can be rewired. It can be. It might take some medication helps. It might take some therapy helps. It might take helps both of those. It might take some helps, but we can, and it's proven that our neuroplasticity of our brain, we can change the neural pathways of our brain. It might take EMDR therapy. It might take years of it. It might take a lifetime of it. But we know through study and clinical trial that people can increase their resourcing in their brain. Memory is powerful. So when we are in those situations where life is too much, but life has to continue, most of us live in that space. Recalling memory, making sure that we are grounded in, or let me use the word, resourced in that truth, that situation, that feeling, that experience, and that sensation begins to take our brain and shifts it out of the moment of too high or too low. As we've tracked, I am feeling dysregulated. I need to move back. Now, how do I know that all of this works? With extreme cases of neurodiversity, it's been shown that these are the tools that they use in studies, research, but also in daily practice with neurodiversity. Tracking and resourcing is what they use to bring a child or an adult back into regulation. So, resourcing is a great tool. Maybe it's that moment of feet in the ocean, that memory. Maybe it's feet on the ground when you're on a hike and you just experience that in your mind. I had somebody tell me that one of their greatest experiences in life was their experience of coaching basketball. And I thought that that was really interesting that their resource is the memory of basketball. They don't try to relive it. They're not out there playing basketball. They're not trying to, relive their childhood or live that experience through their children or anything like that. They just have pictures. They have resources around their home that when they get dysregulated at home, they can begin to think and resource. And for this person, it was just a sport. He just used that and found that that began to shift his mind to more pleasant thoughts and feelings as dealing with chaos. Let me give you this little nugget. If we spend too much time in negative chaos, it is shown that that turns to mental illness. And so I want to warn us and also help us as we are experiencing lots of chaos and our mental illness is up and suicide rates are up. It is showing, it is manifesting itself. People don't want to live anymore and people want to escape, just the idea of escape. I've met more depressed people in the last 10 years than I have in the previous 40 of my life. And yes, that could be because I'm just more aware and an adult and acting more like an adult in the last 10 years, but also the chaos that is happening or the constant feed of chaos in the last 10 years, it just seems serendipitous and coincidental that more people and social media is up and that constant feed. The constant feed is dangerous and can result in certain very adverse effects in our life. So this is why people like Brother David on grateful-living.org, and they are pushing harder and harder and harder for people to practice things like gratefulness. And gratefulness is a resource. It is one of the resources that we need to practice. It could be the memory, or it could be the act of I'm grateful for that. And just acknowledging what is in the room that we are grateful for. And so a theological layer of that is the idea of our minds being steadfast, finding that steadfast, but also the Hebrew idea of shalom. Shalom is the word for wholeness or completeness. And in our resourcing, we need to find a wholeness or completeness or a reminder of what has made us whole or what has made us complete. I know this, that chaos doesn't shape our world. It tears down our world. What shapes our world is completeness, wholeness, and shalom. So chaos tears down our mental world. I know that shalom, holding our attention on a resource, can reshape our internal world. Okay, last tool. Last tool is called grounding. Grounding is the fidget spinner. Let me give you some examples. It's a neurodiversity tool that is used for people that get dysregulated. It is a physical grounding tool. You've seen people hold squishies, right, in their hand. Adults holding squishies in their hand, or that soft ball in the therapy office that is hard but soft at the same time. That is a grounding tool. And grounding goes way back. I mean, we're talking way, way back in our history. It is a physical position to adjust our minds to, a physical position to adjust our minds to. It could be as easy as this. A grounding tool could be every time you shift in your chair because your butt hurts, right? That is a grounding tool. It changes our nervous system for the moment. Right? So when your back hurts, you lean back, you stretch, you put your arms behind your head, whatever it is, that's a grounding tool. A grounding tool, again, is a physical position that our brain adjusts to. So it could be something in our hand, a physical movement. Our brain is adjusting to it. The fidget spinner, a physical movement. When I was coaching, but also when I was being coached in athletics, the wall sit was the punishment. Go sit on the wall. And you'd have to lean your back against the wall and sit. We also know now that that is a grounding tool. Our brain actually adjusts to the wall sit. So no longer are we fighting with our friends out on the court. No longer are we, doing nefarious things or whatever we were punished for in that moment for the wall sit. Go sit on the wall. That movement over to a wall sit, our legs begin to, tense up, our hamstrings, our quads, our calves. We're holding our back against the wall. We might even shake the physical position of our body, so our brain has to pay attention to it. So this is why in yoga, they tell you in yoga to focus on your breath. You're focused on your body, but they're telling you to focus on your breath. It's a physical activity that your brain is connecting to. So all this matters because you're shifting. And in the shift, you begin to become grounded. Now, I think the theological layer here is there was a famous person called Jesus that was continually talking about grounding. He walked paths. He turned water into wine. They drank it. They walked through vineyards. He stood before a fig tree. He drew in the sand. He drew in the dirt, rather. He was the person at the well. There was an actual well. So in those imageries, in those metaphors, whether you believe that those stories are real, true, or whether you believe they're metaphors and just good spiritually, I think that idea of earth grounding is super important. We have a challenge in our society because, and I'm not down on tech. I have my own phone. This is being recorded on tech devices and being pushed out on social media. So everything that I'm like kind of knocking today, I'm using today. So I think that there's very valuable aspects of tech, but this is what tech has done to us. Tech has done this. We no longer chop wood. We no longer walk to our destination. We no longer need bread. We no longer maybe use hand tools. We're all into automatic or battery powered or corded tools. We don't use hand tools anymore. We don't necessarily physically engage with the earth. Hardly any of us are at the riverside fishing for our food, right? We're not climbing over rocks to get to that fishing spot. We drive cars. We move from 72 degrees to 72 degrees. And when it's 69, we're complaining, or when it's 74, it's too hot. And so we are moving from perfect environment to perfect environment environmentally. We are losing our sensations. And so sensation grounding is actually decreasing in our culture. We're no longer active to the ground. We're not farming. Very few of us have garden plots that we're planting. This is why. When somebody says, "Oh, I spent all day Saturday planting in my garden and it was wonderful. I loved it." 200 years ago, no one would have said that. No one would have said on a Saturday they just spent all day farming, they loved it, right? This is why when I just like really work in the earth and I dig post holes and I go, wow, that was real work. No one 150 years ago would have said digging holes was like cathartic, right? They would have said it was work and they would be trying to take breaks from it. Now, because of tech and industrialization and the kind of jobs that we have, our sensations to grounding are decreasing over time. The decades, as we go along in our decades, our grounding has decreased. This is the problem with that. Our nervous system is dependent on grounding sensation. And if we're not engaged in grounding sensation, our nervous systems are going to be weaker and weaker and more dysregulated. And we're going to go into these highs and low zones much more easily. I, would venture to say, now this is a total guess and just coming to the top of my head and I'm thinking out loud. So this is not a clinical research study, but it seems like that depression and anxiety and suicide rates and things like this are off the charts the more and more we just go along in life. And as the decades pass, these things increase and not decrease. When I was in counseling in my early 20s, I was depressed. I struggled with depression. And the counselor said, I think that you need to go for a walk every morning this week. I had weekly counseling. So between Wednesday and Wednesday, my assignment was to go for a walk and just stop, notice the plants, and smell them. And I thought, who is this crazy person telling me to go smell the roses? Right? Who is this person? That was a grounding exercise that I didn't realize was shaping my brain just a little bit for 1 week, right? Just for 1 week. So we are in a dangerous spot that I think, yes, if I'm going to say we need to go knead bread this afternoon, or we need to go dig holes, or we need to climb some hillsides, or we need to, okay, so here's an example for you. Many people that are neurodiverse, I've noticed, knit and listen. And or they do something. They crochet, they knit. I watch them do it many times when I speak. Here's a young person. I mean, my grandmother knitted, but now I see all these younger people knit. And I go, this is interesting. But what I'm noticing is a lot of neurodiverse people are in the audience of the places that I speak, and they're knitting while I'm speaking. Now, at first, I was a little bit irritated because I'm like, why are we knitting? Aren't you supposed to be listening to me, right? Aren't you supposed to be hearing the material and taking notes? Isn't this what you're supposed to be doing? And what was happening to them was, in order to listen or in order to be grounded and to be focused in their resilient zone, they used a tool to move their hands to be grounded. A physical movement adjustment a physical movement that our brains have to adjust to. Simple, but you'll see people with different fidgets and things like that, all physical activity that our brain adjusts to. Now, I think that those are, I wouldn't say extreme examples, but those kind of are outside maybe of your, well, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't knit and listen to a lecture. I don't even have a fidget spinner. Maybe that's where you're at in your brain. You're like, well, maybe this is not for me. This is actually for everybody, because through tracking and through stress and then through tracking, you will notice in your body that you have physical manifestations of stress, anxiety, and literal chaos that's happening around us. We have to do something about that. And I think that through tracking, through resourcing, and through grounding, we can have much progress and become stronger and find, let's say, a new self or a new sense of self. So this is what I would call a restoration activity, where we're restoring our soul, we're restoring our minds. When we become less and less human in our activity, I think that's a internal call to become more human in our activity. And if we don't, we become more and more dead. This is a call to become more and more alive. And even in the midst of the waves and you're in your kayak and it's flooding and you're like, how am I supposed to navigate all of this? This is all about being present in that moment where your paddle is hitting the water and making a difference, and you're doing the very best you can with what you've been given. So when the river speeds up this week, and it will, I can guarantee you that tomorrow you will wake up with a little bit faster river than today. Or it slows down, either one, where I can guarantee you that the river might be slower than it was today. I I don't want your first response first to be judgment of self, because a lot of times we say, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me today?" That's very easy to say. I would say it's just recognition. There's something happening to me today. There's something happening to me in this moment. And use tracking what is going on in my body. It's not a moment to fix it. It's not a moment to get over it or power through it. It's a moment to notice, to remember what's steady and true, the resource in your life that's steady and true. A lot of times I think in the midst of my emotions, emotions don't tell me the truth. Emotions often lie to me. They're real. All emotions are real, and I would never deny somebody's emotions. But a lot of times our emotions don't tell us the truth. So what is true, real, right, beautiful, lovely, consistent? What are my rocks? What are the things that are stable in my life? And then find something in your life that's grounding, that you can participate in on a regular basis. What is it? This is why maybe exercise is important, not only for our physical health, but our mental health as well. Find that, but that doesn't have to be. It could be walking. It could be something that becomes a grounding exercise that's non-negotiable in your life, that you start to practice so that you feel a not perfect control, but a grounding control in your life. So my hope for you is that those three simple concepts, I know they're simple, will help you become steadier during these times, clearer and more anchored in your life. Not because life is going to get easier, life will probably be harder, but to practice resilience amongst the waves, amongst the rapids, and amongst the flooding in your life.